Our next speaker comes to us from Transport Canada, Ms. Laureen Kinney. Currently the Assistant Deputy Minister for Safety and Security, she's responsible for Canada's safety and security programs in transportation across the country, including aviation. In general, Laureen directs the development of regulations and standards in the areas of safety and security, as well as the development of national standards on oversight programs. This includes risk assessments, quality assurance programs, and design of safety management systems, as well as provisions for direction on inspections, enforcement, and training programs. Pretty full plate. I'm jealous. You'll no doubt agree that this list pretty much encompasses all of the things that we've been talking about this week, and we've been working closely with Canadian regulators on these subjects, so her perspective will be timely and extremely interesting. Please, a very warm welcome for Ms. Laureen Kinney. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for the invitation to be here. It's my first opportunity to see how this safety forum is managed, organized, and delivered, and I have to say I'm very impressed. It's an excellent setup. I see really substantive panels, well planned, very thoughtful agendas, and something that as we come out of that somewhat dark budget period that we talked a little bit about yesterday, and we are able to get out more to meet back again with stakeholders, which is very important to us. I'm hoping that we can bring a few more people down so some of our middle management folks can get an opportunity to sit through some of these discussions and have those sidebar discussions. It's a really great opportunity. I'd like to congratulate ALPA on its 85th anniversary. It's very impressive. Since 1931, you've played a vital role in advancing aviation safety, airline safety and security, and promoting that safe and secure operations that are so fundamental to keeping this important business in the world going smoothly. And so without this type of organization and the very, very impressive efforts that you brought together to bring the knowledgeable professionals who are in the world of flying and seeing these various safety and security regimes in place, without that contribution, we would not be as well off as we are today. Transport Canada is obviously very committed to both security and safety, and I'd love to talk more about safety, but the guys did that very well yesterday, and you had some great discussions, so I was very interested in those. But I will focus on aviation safety this morning, aviation security this morning. And I do want to just highlight that Transport Canada does have two roles. So one of the roles that I play is very much what was outlined in the biography and in the regulatory program design, policy setting area for aviation security. But Transport also plays a leadership role with our federal colleagues in the overall aviation security approach taken. And so we work closely with RCMP around things like our IFSO or Air Marshal program in Canada. And I'm glad to see my colleague from the RCMP is here with us as well. And we had some good conversation on that last night, but along with other agencies. So we've got a role there where we've tried to stimulate the forward looking. And I want to take the opportunity this morning to hopefully reflect a little bit about where we've been, what's changed in the world of security over the last few years, and what does that actually mean for how we operate in the future, and throw the forum open to hopefully some good discussion and potentially your ideas on how we can address some of these very, very difficult challenges we're facing. So I'm going to start with a little bit about some of the programs that we've done in the past and the progress we've made, and there's been some great work done, again, collaborating with a lot of partners. But I want to focus on those particular elements where we've learned lessons from the past, or we've actually been able to build partnerships and approach things in a much more holistic way than in very much the past way that governments and regulators have looked at things from a somewhat siloed approach. So the lessons that we come from those, how we've done things in the past, then talk a little bit about the current context and what has changed in the way terrorists are approaching the world. And again, we know all of this. The question is, as opposed to reacting to the individual changes in the way their modus operandi has evolved, what are we thinking about from a system level, and how do we see that impacting on the way that we focus going forward? And some of that is actually how we do business, not just what programs we put in place. And so I think that then I want to lead into talking about where we go and a bit about how do we approach some of these new programs. So I'm going to start with a little bit of the programs that we've worked on in the past, and I think that we've all learned a tremendous amount, and we've made a lot of progress. The TSA and Transport Canada work very closely together so that we can provide as much as possible a seamless system, both for security and safety, frankly, with the FAA. And so that partnership is incredibly important, and I think we've done a good job in the past to a fair degree of bringing in other partners, and by that I mean the industry partners in doing risk assessments in security, bringing in employee groups, airline pilots associations and others to some degree, but I think we're going to need to do more of that in the future. So I, as I say, want to focus a little bit on how we've either done more partnership work in the past and or where we've leveraged other federal colleagues' programs to ensure that we're getting the best outcomes for security and for prevention that we possibly can. So a few of the things that we have done, and I think we've done pretty well, and people can certainly jump up during the question period and express their views and challenge some of these points, so I hope it will be a very interactive discussion. But one of the things that I think Canada has done very well, and that is the creation of CATSA as a screening agency, as a Crown corporation after 9/11. That was stood up extremely quickly, much like what was done with TSA and some of the ways that the U.S. has approached this. Very similar as usual, but not the same, and with its own features that reflect how we do things and what some of our particular constraints and challenges and opportunities are in Canada. So we put that together very quickly. It's been very effective to have, I think, a national screening agency that has national standards, national application. When I think back to 2009, 2010, when I was Director General of Aviation Security, I probably saw 20 public complaints about screening processes, inconsistency, confusion, etc. a week. And I would say, like, there's almost none now. There's been a tremendous growth in getting that consistency together. The security outcomes are very good. I mean, nothing's perfect, but they do a very good job of consistently doing screening, and they've implemented a lot of good modern techniques for managing their screening testing capacity and checking their ability to identify IEDs and all those other things that we do. So that national system has allowed us to react quickly to something going on. And so in the underwear bomber case, we were able to source funding and purchase and install and implement full body scanners in a very rapid timeline. And, I don't think we're using those as much as we can. And that's part of what we're looking at for the future in terms of how can we enhance and upgrade our screening capacity. But there's a lot of other things that we need to work on, and we've done the Passenger Protect program, which is now under the leadership of Public Safety, and has done an effective job there, and it's now got an evolution to a broader program that is looking at more than just the boarding of aircraft for the purposes of potentially attacking an aircraft, but the actual spreading of terrorism and foreign activities. So these programs are begun, they're studied, they're analyzed, we learn from them, and they evolve. And we're going to need to evolve considerably in the future. So that's something that we really do need to think about. I think one of the programs that I do want to touch on is Nexus, and under the Beyond the Border initiative, I was actually responsible for negotiating several of those initiatives. And in that case, we started to, I think, more effectively take advantage of other departments' programs. And so both in the US and in Canada, we took advantage of customs programs that were already in existence for Nexus. And we've managed to leverage that into a considerable improvement at the airports in screening. Now, more can be done and more will hopefully be done. But the bottom line is, rather than rigidly saying we must have an aviation security dedicated program that's designed exactly by us, that meets 100% of our interests and preferences, we said, how can we get 80 or 90% of what we want to achieve very rapidly by using and leveraging another agency's programs? That was a really remarkable moment, because that doesn't happen everywhere in the world, and it doesn't happen everywhere in any of our governments. And so this is something we need to do more of in the future, and we need to take advantage of those opportunities. And it goes to what is it we're trying to achieve? How do we look at what's the best way to approach risk management, et cetera? And so again, I'm going to come back to that a little bit in the next few minutes. But one of the things as well that I want to talk about is non-passenger screening, and I'm going to speak a little bit about, I'm sure, the topic most dear to your heart, which is known crew member programs in some of those areas. But we have also evolved our non-passenger screening program, and we are now implementing the new ICAO requirements for a much higher level of screening. And so one of the things that we did, and I think the point that I want to take out of that is that we could see that coming. We knew that we needed to look at non-passenger screening, and what is our logic? What is the goal that we're trying to achieve? And this will be very much in line with, I think, some of the representation that's been made by ALPA and others, is when you're looking at screening, we have had a tendency from a security perspective to look at the screening by itself as anybody could bring anything through, and are they going to potentially bring explosives through as checkpoint, and then what is the impact of that? But you have to look at that from a risk perspective. You have to look at it as if the solution to someone who's on the inside bringing something through into the sterile area that's going to put us at risk, and it doesn't matter what that thing is, what are we actually achieving with a screening process? And we are achieving something for the large majority of what's going through, but we can apply that in a risk-managed and logical way, and that's what we've done in Canada, and consistent with, I think, some of the general approaches in the US. But at the end of the day, and this is very much the point that I know pilots have made strongly, is after you've screened them and taken away the yogurt container, what is going to happen after that? There's really nothing that has been achieved to a large degree. Other than that, there's a layer there that is a potential risk reduction element. And so from our perspective, we don't intend to have zero screening for pilots. There is a logic to where we need to look at what is the right kind of non-passenger screening and how do we apply that. And so our team is working now with the associations and also with CATSA on, is there a way to technically look at something like what we do with the randomizer mats on the public side? Is there a way of differentiated screening percentages and differentiated approach so that we can recognize the different risk levels and the different potential concerns that we have there? And is there a way that we can apply that in a logical way and in a still rigorous way? And so we don't have the answer to that yet, but I can tell you that we are open to that conversation, and we are pursuing that. And Brenda Hensler-Hobbs, our Director General, is working on that, so I'm sure there'll be a few questions on that when we come back. But it goes to, again, first we have to really well identify the risk. We have to understand how that works, and I would say we've done very much the same kind of work in our safety side on the UAVs. And how do we apply a regulatory framework to UAVs, and where are the risks? And so when we look at that, first you look at what are the risks, then you look at the things that you have available as mitigations, and you think about how will those actually address effectively the risks. And so we're making that a much more rigorous and scientific process in Canada. But the second part of that is we need to bring people into the risk assessment process so that we have a broader discussion. And so in the preparation to some of the changes that we're evolving on non-passenger screening, we had fairly extensive efforts where we brought industry into the discussion, and we really talked about how do the operations of the airport get affected, and how can we make sure that we're not creating unintended consequences, and how do we ensure that whatever we put in place for non-passenger screening is actually achieving the outcome that we looked for, not simply an activity that makes us feel that we're making a progress on that. So those are our processes and ways of approaching that we've put a lot of effort into. And I better move a little bit. Ah, yes, there I can see my timing. Give me a second. I see 1 minute. Did we start at 35 and I'm out of time already? Can I just get a check where we are in time? Right now it's like 9 what? Yeah, but what time is it now? It's 9. Okay, so I am getting to the end of my points, so that's good. The timing doesn't quite match, so I just want to be careful because I do want the time for conversation. So I won't go into the major changes that have happened in the last few years, but as the evolution from the Al-Qaeda type activities and attack plans have come towards more the ISIL-led type of attacks, and we've seen much more of the random ad hoc front of house type promotion and very unplanned or modestly planned or locally spur of the moment type of attacks. One of the things is we've responded to that, and we've looked at how we modify our programs. But we not only have to look at what are the programs that we need to change and how do we put new programs in place, and airport security programs, and which is really the airport SMS in the security world, is well advanced, and we've made some good progress on that. And we will be looking at that for our carriers in the future as well. But we also need to look at how do we actually respond and operate. So how do we on the ground change? And we've done a lot of work in the last couple of years to talk about, as things come along and as we see the first indicators happening and as we see something starting as an attack threat or a threat coming forward, how is it that we're operationally responding? So we've actually expanded considerably our network of secret cleared industry stakeholders, and we've gotten an ability together, and we've actually operationalized the ability to have immediate security conference calls that are secret level, that we can actually discuss some of these issues and what are some of the things we're looking at doing and what's the feedback on that. In some areas, I think the U.S. is ahead of us in the fusion centers because I'm not sure that we've brought all the partners in, and so I think there's an area there that we should discuss as to what degree ALPA and some of the other associations possibly might want to be part of that discussion so that we can have actually a robust discussion in the moment about, okay, this is what we know, these are what the contingency plans we have in place, what are we going to do going forward? And we'll still make a decision on that because we have that accountability. But we have a shared responsibility here, and we want to make sure that's effective. So how can we do that? I think the other area that I would really throw out for some thought and consideration is that part of the spontaneity of these types of attacks and the change in the attacker's ability to switch approaches and switch their attack plan at the last minute makes it more difficult to respond, of course. And so people, again, are working on that. But the question is, again, in the operational moment, how do we actually address that? And part of it is, I think, in doing more exercises, more of those kinds of exercises with all the parties involved. And the other part that I think we could perhaps look at is, what do we do on board the aircraft? And I think this is something we've talked a little bit about in the past, but perhaps not enough. When we get that first indication of something happening, you take an underwear bomber or something like that, whatever it might be, something's happened on one aircraft. We know there's a frequent interest, whether it's going to happen this time or not, there's a frequent interest in doing waves of attacks. So what more could we be doing to integrate our work with the onboard people that the RCMP have out there, the air marshals or our IFSOs as we call them, and the Air Canada, the NAVCAN system, and how do we get that alert out, and what is it that potentially the pilot and the crew could be doing to minimize some of the risks? It may not be 100% effective, but what can we do to actually make that work better? Because especially if we're going to get more and more of these social media threats and other kinds of threats, we're going to need to stimulate the system more frequently, and that means we need to have a plan that perhaps goes a little bit more in detail in that area. So I'm going to leave it there because I do want to leave that time for conversation, but I think there's areas that will be well worth our discussion, and more perhaps not so much this morning, but for the longer term. But I'd really welcome ideas and suggestions in that regard. Thank you.